On a crisp, bright autumn afternoon in New York City, the air was cool enough to see your breath. The sun was strong enough to keep you warm without a heavy coat. The streets were packed with the usual rush taxis honking, people marching toward the subway, and tourists looking up at the tall buildings. But Keanu Reeves wasn't rushing. He was moving slowly, trying his best to look like everyone else. Keanu pulled the brim of his baseball cap down lower over his eyes. He was wearing a simple dark jacket, a pair of jeans that looked like they had seen better days, and worn-out boots. He wasn't wearing the fancy suits people saw him in at movie premieres. Today, he was just a man taking a walk. He held a paper cup of cheap coffee in his hand, the warmth seeping through the cardboard and into his fingers. It was a small comfort, but sometimes small comforts are the best ones. He turned a corner and stepped into Central Park. It was like entering a different. The noise of the traffic faded away, replaced by the sound of wind rustling through the drying leaves and the distant laughter of children. Keanu let out a long breath he felt like he'd been holding in for days. Being famous is a strange thing. It brings amazing opportunities, but it also takes away the simple ability to just be. You can't just sit on a bench and watch the world go by without people wondering if you are okay, or asking for a photo, or whispering behind your back. Today, he just wanted to disappear. He walked along a winding path, watching a dog chase a frisbee and an old man feeding pigeons. These were the moments that grounded him. He wasn't thinking about Hollywood scripts or box office numbers. He was just thinking about how nice the breeze felt. After walking for about 20 minutes, he spotted a free wooden bench near a small playground. It looked like the perfect spot to stop, drink his coffee, and maybe clear his head for a while. Keanu walked over and sat down. The wood was hard, but he didn't mind. He took a slow sip of his coffee, leaning back and crossing one leg over the other. He watched a group of joggers pass by, none of them giving him a second glance. He smiled to himself. Success, he thought. I am invisible. For a while, he just sat there. He watched the clouds moving slowly across the blue sky. He thought about how fast life moves. One day you are young, and the next you are sitting on a park bench watching a new generation grow up. Keanu has seen a lot of sadness in his own life, more than most people know. Because of that, he always tries to find peace in the quiet moments. He knows that life can change in a heartbeat, so he tries to appreciate the stillness whenever he can find it. As he sat there, enjoying the calm, two young boys ran onto the grass nearby. They looked to be around 10 years old. They were dressed in jeans and sneakers, and they were full of energy. They threw their backpacks on the ground and started tossing a small lacrosse ball back and forth. They were laughing and shouting, completely lost in their game. Keanu watched them from behind his coffee cup. It made him feel good to see kids having fun. It reminded him of when he was a boy, back before the world got so complicated. He remembered playing sports with friends, not worrying about money or fame, just worrying about catching the ball. He started to zone out a little, letting his mind wander. The boys were just background noise to him at first, just another part of the park's soundtrack. He heard the thwack of the ball hitting their gloves and the shuffle of their sneakers on the grass. But after a while, the game slowed down. The boys got tired. They stopped running and dropped down onto the grass right near Keanu's bench. They were close enough that he could hear them clearly, without trying to eavesdrop. He didn't want to be nosy. He was just a stranger, sharing a space. He tried to focus on the book in his other hand, pretending to read. But the boys' voices started to cut through his concentration. One of the boys, who had messy brown hair, flopped onto his back and stared up at the sky. He let out a huge sigh. It wasn't a sigh of boredom from playing. It sounded heavier than that. It sounded like a sigh that came from deep inside his chest. Keanu lowered his book just an inch, looking over the rim of his cup. He watched the boys without turning his head. The other boy, who was wearing a red hoodie, sat cross-legged and started pulling at the grass. I don't know, man, the boy in the red hoodie said, breaking the silence. My dad says we might have to move. The boy on the grass didn't sit up. He just kept looking at the clouds. Move? Like to a new house? That could be cool. No, the other boy said quietly. Not like a cool house. He means we can't afford this apartment anymore. He hasn't found a new job yet? He's been looking for months. Keanu's hand froze halfway to his mouth. The casual, happy feeling of the afternoon suddenly shifted. He wasn't just a passerby anymore. He was witnessing a private moment between two friends. He knew he should look away or put his headphones on, but something in the boy's voice stopped him. It was a tone of voice that Keanu recognized all too well. It was the sound of worry that is too big for a kid to have to carry. The boy on the grass sat up then, looking concerned. That sucks. I thought your dad was like a super genius with computers. He is, the boy in the hoodie said, his voice cracking a little. But nobody is hiring right now. And my mom is stressed all the time. I hear them talking at night when they think I'm asleep. They're scared about the rent. Keanu slowly took a sip of his coffee to hide his expression. He felt a familiar ache in his chest. He knew what it was like to be a kid in a situation where the adults are scared. He knew what it felt like to listen to parents whispering about money, feeling helpless because you are too small to fix it. I just wish I could help, the boy in the hoodie continued, throwing a small pinnacone into the dirt. I tried to sell my old video games, but nobody bought them. It's not enough anyway. You don't have to fix it, dude. You're a kid, his friend said, trying to sound brave. Your dad will figure it out. I know, the boy said, looking down at his sneakers. But it's my birthday next week. Usually, we go to that pizza place, the really expensive one. And I asked for this new game console. I heard my mom telling my aunt on the phone that she doesn't know how she's going to get it for me. She feels terrible. And I feel terrible. I don't even care about the game that much anymore. I just want them to stop being sad. Keanu lowered his book completely now, resting it on his lap. He wasn't looking at the pages. He was looking at the back of the boy's head. He wasn't just a celebrity overhearing fans. He was a human being hearing a cry for help, even if it wasn't directed at him. Here was a boy who wasn't worried about video games or popularity anymore. He was worried about his family. He was willing to sacrifice his own birthday happiness just to see his parents smile again. That kind of selflessness is rare, and it hit Keanu hard. The park around them seemed to get quieter. The laughter from the playground faded into the background. All Keanu could focus on was the conversation happening a few feet away. He realized that this was one of those moments where the universe puts you in a specific place for a reason. He had come to the park to find peace, but maybe he was there to give something back. He looked at the boys. They had no idea who was sitting behind them. To them, he was just a guy in a hoodie. But as Keanu watched them, he knew that his anonymity was a gift. He could do something here, something that wasn't for a movie or a camera. It could just be for them. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision forming in his mind. The simple coffee break was over. The real part of the day was just beginning. The silence that hung in the air after the boy's confession was heavy. It wasn't an awkward silence, but the kind that settles in when something serious is said and nobody knows exactly how to fix it. The wind picked up a little, rustling the dry leaves above their heads, sending a small shower of yellow and orange onto the grass around them. The friend sitting on the grass didn't look away. He looked at his buddy with a mix of confusion and determination. He was young, but he understood that his friend was hurting. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, trying to come up with a solution. Kids are great like that. They often try to fix things that adults have already decided are broken. "Okay, look," the friend said, his voice serious. "We can do something. I have some money saved up in my piggy bank. It's not a ton, but it's maybe like $50? You could have that for your birthday." The boy in the red hoodie shook his head slowly, looking at the dirt between his sneakers. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "That's really nice of you. But $50 isn't enough for a new console, and it definitely isn't enough to help with the rent. I can't take your money anyway. Your mom saved that for your college or something. Who cares about college?" "I'm 10, the friend said, waving his hand dismissively. "I'd rather you have it. We can wash cars. People pay for that, right? We can go door to door in your building. We have buckets. We can wash their hallways or something. We can make $100 in a day, easy." Keanu watched the interaction closely, his coffee cup resting on his knee. He was struck by the loyalty of the friend. It reminded him of the friendships he had made over the years, the ones that stuck around when the cameras stopped rolling. The world is full of people who want something from you. But every once in a while, you find someone who just wants you to be okay. The boy in the hoodie picked up a stick and started drawing circles in the dirt. His voice was quiet when he spoke again. It's not just about the money, though. It's the vibe in the house, you know? It's like walking on eggshells all the time. My dad used to laugh a lot. He used to make jokes. Now he just stares at the TV, and my mom. She tries to cook dinner, but then the phone rings, and it's probably the bank, and she just gets quiet. He stopped drawing and looked up at the sky, blinking a few times quickly. Keanu could see his jaw clenching. He was trying hard not to cry. Last night, the boy continued, his voice barely a whisper. I got up to get a drink of water. The kitchen light was off, but I could hear my mom. She was sitting at the table with her head in her hands. She wasn't making any noise, but I could tell she was shaking. I wanted to go in there and hug her, but I didn't. I just went back to my room. Keanu felt a tightness in his own chest. That was a specific kind of pain. As a child, realizing your parents are human and that they can break is a terrifying moment. It steals your innocence. You go from thinking they are superheroes who can fix anything to realizing they are just people trying to survive. It was a feeling Keanu knew far too well. He remembered nights from his own childhood, times when things were unstable and the fear that comes with not knowing if you will have a home next month. You shouldn't have to see that, the friend said softly. He reached over and punched his buddy lightly on the shoulder. That's adult stuff. You're just a kid. I know, the boy in the hoodie said, letting out a long breath. But I feel like I'm part of the problem. They have to feed me. They have to buy me clothes. If I wasn't there, maybe they would have enough money to be okay. Maybe they wouldn't be so stressed, was the sentence that hit Keanu the hardest. If I wasn't there, to hear a 10-year-old talk about himself as a burden was heartbreaking. It was a thought that should never enter a child's mind. Children are supposed to be a source of joy, not a calculation on a budget sheet. Keanu gripped his coffee cup tighter. The casual walk in the park had turned into a window into a family's crisis. The friend looked angry now. Don't say that. You're not a problem. You're the best thing that probably happened to them. They love you. I know they love me, the boy said quickly. But love doesn't pay the bills. I heard them talking about my birthday cake. My mom said, we can't afford a big party. Maybe we just get a cupcake. And my dad sounded so tired when he said, yeah, a cupcake is fine. It's not fine, though. I don't want a cupcake. I want them to stop worrying. I wish I could just give them my birthday. I don't need presents. I just want them to smile again. Keanu looked down at his boots. He thought about his own life. He had been very lucky in recent years. He had more money than he could ever spend. He made movies that millions of people watched. He lived in a nice home. But sitting there, listening to this boy, all of that felt very far away. The only thing that mattered was the sadness in that kid's voice. He realized that the universe has a funny way of working. You go out looking for a quiet coffee, and you end up sitting 5 feet away from a problem that you can actually solve. Most of the time we walk past people every day who are suffering, and we never know. We pass them on the subway, we stand in line behind them at the grocery store, and we have no idea that their world is falling apart. But today, curtain had been pulled back just a little bit. The boy in the hoodie threw the stick he was holding as far as he could. It landed near some bushes. I guess I just have to wait until I'm older, he said, trying to sound tough. Then I can get a job and pay for everything. I'm going to buy them a huge house. One with a pool. You're going to be a billionaire, the friend laughed, trying to lighten the mood again. You're going to invent something cool. Yeah, maybe. The boy smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Keanu took a deep breath. He knew he couldn't just walk away. He couldn't finish his coffee, stand up, and go back to his life knowing that he left this moment untouched. It wasn't about being a hero. It wasn't about wanting a thank you. It was about basic human decency. If you have the power to lift a heavy weight off someone's shoulders, shouldn't you do it? Especially when that someone is a kid who just wants his parents to stop crying. He looked at the envelope of cash sticking out of his jacket pocket. He had taken it out of the ATM earlier that morning. It was just pocket money to him, maybe to buy some books or have a nice dinner. He didn't need it for survival. But this boy, This boy needed exactly what was in that pocket. He needed to know that the world wasn't just a cold, hard place where you had to walk on eggshells. He needed a win. The wind blew a little colder, making the boys shiver. Keanu made his decision. He wasn't going to be a stranger anymore. He was going to be a participant. He finished the last sip of his coffee, crumpled the cup slightly, and prepared to stand up. The conversation had shifted again back to video games, as kids often do to escape the heavy stuff. But the weight of the sadness was still hanging in the air. Keanu cleared his throat softly, preparing to speak. He didn't want to scare them. He didn't want to make a scene. He just wanted to step into their story for a brief moment and change the ending. Keanu sat there for another moment, staring at the empty paper cup in his hands. The boys had managed to steer the conversation back to safer waters. They were talking about a funny scene from a cartoon they both watched, laughing at a joke Keanu didn't understand. But to him, the laughter sounded thin. It was like putting a Band-Aid on a deep cut covered the wound. But the pain was still throbbing underneath. He watched the boy in the red hoodie closely. Even as he laughed at his friend's joke, his shoulders were slumped forward. He was picking at a loose thread on his jeans, twisting it around his finger until his fingertip turned purple. It was a nervous habit. Keanu knew that body language well. It was the body language of someone carrying a weight that was too heavy for their size. A cold gust of wind blew through the park, making the bare branches of the trees clatter together like dry bones. The boy shivered and pulled his jacket tighter around himself, but it didn't help much. The jacket looked thin, worn out at the cuffs. Keanu looked at his own jacket of high quality, a thick leather coat that had cost more than the boy's father probably made in a week. For a second, he felt a flash of guilt. He had so much, and right next to him a kid was worrying about the price of a birthday cake. It wasn't fair. Life is rarely fair. Keanu knew that. He had learned that lesson the hard way when he was very young. He thought back to his own childhood. He remembered moving from city to city, living in different places, never quite feeling like he fit in. He remembered the feeling of instability, the fear of the unknown. He knew what it felt like to not know if things were going to be okay tomorrow, but he had been lucky. He found an outlet in acting. He found people who believed in him. He had fought hard to get where he was, clawing his way up from nothing. This boy, sitting just a few feet away on the scratchy grass, hadn't had his big break yet. Right now, his life was defined by limitations. He was defined by what he couldn't have, what he couldn't do, and what he couldn't fix. Keanu thought about the boy's words. Asterisk, I wish I wasn't there. Asterisk, that sentence echoed in Keanu's mind like a gong. It was the saddest thing he had heard in a long time. For a child to feel that their existence is the problem, it was a tragedy. Every child deserves to feel like they are a gift, not a burden. Keanu realized that this wasn't just about money anymore. Yes, the cash would help. It would pay the rent or buy the groceries. But the act of giving could do something much more powerful. It could tell this boy, asterisk, you matter. You are seen. You are not a burden. Asterisk, he looked around the park. People were rushing by, lost in their own worlds. A woman was talking loudly on her phone about a business meeting. A jogger ran past with headphones on, staring straight ahead. Nobody else saw these two boys. Nobody else heard the pain in that conversation. They were just background noise to the busy city. But Keanu was there. He had heard it. And he knew that with great privilege comes a responsibility to actually do something when you can. He reached into his jacket pocket and felt the thick envelope he had stuffed in there earlier that morning. He had withdrawn a few $1,000s in cash, intending to buy something special for himself, or maybe just have it on hand for the weekend. It was a spontaneous thing. Now, holding the envelope, he knew exactly why he had taken that money out. It wasn't for him. It was never for him. It was for this moment. Keanu took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs. He felt a sense of calm settle over him. The anxiety about approaching strangers, the worry about making a scene, it all faded away. There was only a clear, simple purpose. He needed to intervene. He needed to step out of the shadows and be a force for good in these kids' lives. He didn't want to be Keanu Reeves, the movie star right now. That persona came with baggage. It came with awe and shock and smartphones snapping pictures. He wanted to be a neighbor. He wanted to be a kind stranger who restores a little bit of faith in the world. The boys were starting to pack up their things. They stood up, dusting the grass off their pants. The boy in the red hoodie swung his backpack over one shoulder, looking at the ground. "Well, I gotta go," he said to his friend. "My mom is probably waiting," Kay, his friend, said, looking sympathetic. "Hey, it's gonna be okay. Seriously. We'll figure something out for your birthday." "Yeah," the boy said, trying to smile. "See ya." He started to turn away, his head down, kicking a rock as he walked. This was it. This was the moment. If Keanu didn't speak up now, the boy would walk away, go back to his stressful apartment, and nothing would change. The universe had presented Keanu with a choice: stay comfortable and silent, or take a risk and make a difference. Keanu stood up. His joints cracked a little as he stretched. He wasn't 20 anymore, after all, but he felt light on his feet. He smoothed down his jacket. He didn't put his cap back on. He wanted them to see his face. He wanted them to see his eyes, so they would know he was being sincere. "Hey guys," Keanu said. His voice wasn't loud. It was calm and steady, but it stopped the boys in their tracks. The boy in the red hoodie turned around slowly. He looked at Keanu, his eyes narrowing slightly as he tried to place the face. Then his eyes went wide, and his mouth dropped open just a little. He looked at the friend, who looked just as shocked. "Wait," the boy whispered. "Are you?" Keanu smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. He held up his hands, palms open, in a peaceful gesture. He didn't want them to scream or run. He just wanted to connect. "Yeah, it's me," Keanu said softly. "I was sitting on the bench over there and I couldn't help but overhear you guys talking. I hope you don't mind." The boys were frozen. They were standing in the presence of a real-life action hero, a guy they had seen in movies dozens of times. But Keanu didn't act like a movie star. He stood with his shoulders relaxed, his hands in his pockets, looking at them like they were equals. The boy stammered, his face turning bright red. He was terrified he had said something embarrassing. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," Keanu said immediately, taking a small step closer. "Please don't be sorry. I was actually really touched by what you were saying. It takes a lot of guts to care about your family the way you do. I just wanted to tell you that." The boy looked down at his sneakers, overwhelmed. He didn't know how to process this. A minute ago, he was invisible, sad and worried. Now, a celebrity was telling him he was brave. Keanu looked at the boy's face. He saw the embarrassment, the shyness, and the underlying sadness that was still there. He knew that words were good, but action was better. He knew that this boy needed more than just a pep talk. He needed to know that the world could be generous. He needed to know that sometimes magic happens. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out the thick envelope. It was white and plain, just a simple piece of stationery. But inside, it held the power to change this family's month, maybe their year. He held it in his hand for a second, feeling the weight of it. He looked at the boy, making eye contact, holding his gaze so he would understand the seriousness of the moment. "You were talking about how things are tough right now," Keanu said, his voice low enough so only the three of them could hear. "And listen, life gets hard. It gets really hard sometimes. But you're a good kid. You're a good son. And nobody should have to worry about rent on their birthday." The boy stared at the white envelope in Keanu's hand. His eyes were wide, darting from the paper to the famous face and back again. For a second, he looked terrified. It was a mix of shock and instinctive politeness. He shook his head vigorously, taking a half step backward. No, I can't," the boy stammered, holding his hands up as if to block the offer. "That S? I mean, thank you, but I can't take your money. That's crazy." His friend stood there frozen, mouth slightly open, looking back and forth between them like he was watching a tennis match. He wanted to scream, "Take the money!" But he could see his friend's distress. Keanu didn't pull the envelope back. He kept it steady right there in the space between them. He smiled gently, a look of understanding on his face. He knew this reaction. People have pride. Even kids have pride. Taking help feels like admitting you are weak, and this boy was already fighting hard to be strong for his family. It's not crazy, Keanu said softly. He took a small step closer, closing the distance just enough to make the moment feel intimate but not threatening. Listen to me. I was sitting right there. I heard you. You're worried about your parents. You're worried about the rent and your birthday, and the heavy stuff that 10-year-olds shouldn't have to carry around. The boy looked down at his feet, his face burning with embarrassment. It's one thing to complain to a friend, but it's another thing to have your problems laid out in front of a stranger, even a famous one. I know what that feels like, Keanu continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious and heartfelt. I know what it's like to be in a spot where things look dark. I know what it's like to love your parents so much it hurts, and to wish you could fix everything for them. The boy looked up then. He saw something in Keanu's eyes that surprised him. It wasn't pity. Pity is a cold thing. It looks down on people. This was warmth. This was empathy. It was the look of someone who had walked through the fire and came out the other side. Out. I want to do this, Keanu said. Not because you're poor, and not because I feel sorry for you, but because you're a good kid. I heard you say you'd give up your birthday to make them smile. That is rare. That is special. And the world should be kind to people who think like that. He held the envelope out a little further, waiting. The wind rustled the paper, making a soft snapping sound. The boy hesitated. His heart was pounding against his ribs. He knew his mom would cry if he brought this home. He knew his dad would argue at first, and then cry later. It would change everything. It would fix the immediate terror. Why me? The boy whispered, his voice cracking. There are so many people, Keanu shrugged, a simple, humble movement. Because today is the day our paths crossed. Sometimes the universe gives you a mission, and you just have to say yes. Today my mission was to sit on that bench, and now it's to give you this. He gestured with the envelope. Please, take it. Use it for the rent. Use it for groceries. And yes, buy that game console. But make sure you get one for your friend, too. He sounds like a good guy. The friend let out a nervous laugh, wiping his sweaty palms on his jeans. The boy in the red hoodie looked at his friend, who gave him a tiny, encouraging nod. Slowly, tremblingly, the boy reached out. His small hand closed around the envelope. It was thick, much thicker than he expected. He could feel the texture of the bills inside. It felt heavy, like a brick of gold. Keanu didn't let go immediately. He looked the boy dead in the eye, his grip tightening on the envelope for a split second to emphasize his next words. Okay, Keanu said. Do not let this make you feel small. You're not a charity case. You're just a guy who got a break today. And one day, you're older and you're rich and successful, because I know you will, but I want you to remember this feeling. I want you to find someone who needs a break, and I want you to help them. That's how we pay it forward. The boy nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He swallowed hard, blinking away tears that were suddenly threatening to spill over. Keanu let go of the envelope. The boy pulled it close to his chest, holding it tight, as if it might blow away in the wind. Phew. It was barely a sound, but it carried all the gratitude in the world. You're very welcome, Keanu said, his bright smile returning. The boy looked down at the envelope, then back up at Keanu. Is this enough for my dad? He asked innocently. Keanu chuckled softly. It should cover a lot. It should give him a chance to breathe. Just tell him. Tell him a stranger appreciates the hard work. The friend finally found his voice. Dude, you have to tell your parents. But don't say it's Keanu Reeves. They won't believe you. Say it's a secret admirer. Keanu laughed, a genuine deep laugh. That's actually good advice. If you tell them it's me, they'll think you're crazy or making it up. Let it be a mystery. Just tell them someone wanted to help. Okay, the boy said. He looked at Keanu with a sense of wonder. I won't forget this. Ever. Keanu looked at the two of them standing there. The heavy gray cloud that had been hanging over the conversation was gone. The boy's shoulders weren't slumped anymore. He stood taller. The air around them felt lighter. It was amazing how a piece of paper could change the physics of a moment. You guys take care of each other, Keanu said, looking at the friend. Keep looking out for him. That's what friends do. We will, the friend promised. Looking like he was ready to fight a bear for Keanu right then and there, Keanu stuffed his hands back into his pockets. He felt lighter too. The money was gone, yes, but the weight he had been carrying, the weight of his own isolation, was lifting. He had connected. He had done something real. It was a better feeling than any premiere, any applause, any movie review. You should probably get going, Keanu said gently, nodding toward the park exit. Your mom is waiting. And don't lose that envelope. The boy clutched the envelope tighter. I won't. Thanks again. Thank you. You're welcome, Keanu said. The boys turned to leave, but they only took a few steps before stopping. They looked back, as if to check that he was real, that he wasn't a ghost or a hallucination brought on by too much worry. Keanu stood there, the cool wind blowing his hair. He gave them a small salute. They smiled widely real, full smiles this time, then turned and ran toward the park gate. They were faster now, lighter on their feet. They weren't trudging toward a problem anymore. They were running toward a solution. Keanu watched them go until they disappeared into the crowd of people leaving the park. He stood there for a long time, just breathing. He looked down at his empty hand, the one that had held the envelope. He closed his fingers into a fist and then opened them again. Around him, the city continued its noisy rhythm. The sirens wailed, the cars honked, the people rushed. But for a moment, Keanu felt perfectly still. He realized that while he had given those boys a lifeline, they had given him something just as important. They had reminded him that despite all the chaos and hardness of the world, kindness is still the most powerful force there is. It doesn't take a superhero to save the day. Sometimes, it just takes a guy on a bench who is willing to listen. He adjusted his jacket, pulled his cap back down, and turned to walk in the opposite direction. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the grass. It was a beautiful evening. And for one family in New York, tonight was going to be a little easier than yesterday. Keanu stood alone on the path for a long moment after the boys disappeared. The spot where they had been sitting was empty now, just a patch of flattened grass and a few forgotten blades of green. The wind blew a dry leaf across the bench where he had been sitting, swirling it in a small circle before settling down. It was quiet again. The intense energy of the conversation, the fear, the sadness, and the sudden rush of hope had left the air. But the feeling remained pressed against Keanu's chest. He let out a long, slow breath. It wasn't a sigh of relief, but a sigh of contentment. He looked down at his boots, scuffing the dirt slightly. For the last hour, he hadn't been a movie star. He hadn't been a celebrity who had to watch his back or worry about who was watching him. He had just been a human being listening to other human beings. And in that simplicity, he had found something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. He turned and began to walk toward the park exit. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, painting the buildings in the distance with a soft, golden light. The city was waking up from its afternoon lull. The rush hour was beginning. People were leaving their offices, hurrying toward subways and buses, their minds already on dinner, on traffic, on the 100 little stresses of daily life. Keanu blended right into them. He pulled his cap down low and shoved his hands deep into his jacket pockets. As he walked, he passed a street musician playing a saxophone. The sound was jazzy and a bit mournful, echoing off the stone walls. Keanu stopped, for just a second, to drop a few dollars into the musician's open case. The player nodded without looking up, too lost in the music to see who had dropped the money. Keanu smiled. That was how it should be. Just a quiet exchange of kindness between strangers. No fanfare needed. He thought about the boy in the red hoodie. He wondered what was happening right at that very second. Were the boys running? Were they laughing? He imagined them bursting into the apartment, out of breath, waving that white envelope like a flag of victory. He tried to picture the look on the mother's face. The shock, the disbelief, and then the overwhelming flood of tears. He hoped she would cry happy tears tonight. He hoped the heavy knot of anxiety in her stomach would loosen. Just for a little while, He knew that money wouldn't fix everything. It wouldn't magically make a job appear. It wouldn't solve all the family's problems forever, but it would buy them time. It would buy them a birthday cake. It would buy them a night where they didn't have to panic about the rent. Sometimes that is all a person needs, not a miracle. It's just a little bit of breathing room to figure out the next step. Keanu thought about his own life. People often treated him like he was special because he was famous. They screamed his name at premieres and wore t-shirts with his face on them. But that wasn't real. That was a projection. What was real was this moment. What was real was the ability to use the luck he had been given to make a dent in someone else's bad luck. He felt a profound sense of gratitude. He was grateful that he had been sitting on that specific bench. He was grateful that the boys had spoken loud enough for him to hear. He was grateful that he had the chance to play a small part in their story. A car honked loudly on the street nearby, snapping him back to the present. The light changed, and the crowd surged forward. Keanu moved with them, one face among thousands. He liked this anonymity. It allowed him to see the world as it really was. He saw a tired nurse waiting for the bus, holding a coffee cup like it was a lifeline. He saw a businessman looking stressed, shouting into his phone. He saw a homeless man sitting against a wall, asking for change. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out the remaining bills he had, dropping them quietly into the man's cup as he walked past. The man mumbled a "God bless you," and Keanu nodded under his cap. It was strange, he thought. We walk past so many people every day. Every single person has a story. Every single person is carrying a heavy burden that we can't see. The boy in the park had taught him that. We are all walking through the same storm. It's just wearing different coats. He walked for several blocks, aimlessly wandering. He didn't have a destination. He didn't have a meeting to get to. He was just enjoying the feeling of the city. He thought about what he would say if anyone asked him where he had been all afternoon. He wouldn't tell them. He wouldn't post about it on social media. He wouldn't give an interview about it to a magazine. That was the beauty of it. The secret belonged to him and those two boys. In a world where everything is recorded and shared and analyzed, keeping a moment private made it sacred. If he took a selfie with them, the moment would have been about him. It would have been, look, Keanu Reeves met these fans. But this way, it was just about them. It was about two friends having the best day of their lives. He liked that. He liked being the anonymous benefactor, the mystery man who stepped out of the shadows. It felt cleaner. It felt truer, as the streetlights flickered on, illuminating the sidewalk. Keanu felt a lightness in his step that had been missing for a while. He had spent years dealing with loss, with the pain of losing people he loved. He had often wondered how to make sense of the suffering in the world. Today, he had found an answer. You can't fix the whole world. You can't stop all the pain. But you can patch up one little hole in the universe. You can help one person, and that matters. He reached the edge of a neighborhood he knew well. He could smell the aroma of garlic and onions drifting from an Italian restaurant. His stomach rumbled a little, reminding him he hadn't eaten since breakfast. It felt good to have a normal appetite. Keanu looked up at the sky. The first stars of the evening were starting to peek through the glow of the city lights. They were small and distant, but they were shining. He thought about the boy in the red hoodie again. He hoped that when the boy grew up, he would remember this day. He hoped he would remember that kindness is real, even when things seem dark. Keanu whispered a silent wish to the universe for that family, that they would catch a break, that the dad would find a job, and that the birthday next week would be filled with real laughter. With one last look at the busy street, Keanu turned the corner. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The chapter was closed. He walked away from the park, disappearing into the flow of the city like a ghost, leaving behind nothing but footprints and a little bit of hope. The city roared around him, loud and chaotic, but Keanu Reeves walked in silence, his heart full.